Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video episode on the Forgotten Weapons Library. I'm Ian, and today we're taking a look at sort of book that I don't normally go for. This is called Handguns of the World, and it's one of these big coffee table type cover everything that's ever been built sort of books. And normally that sort of thing is usually a bit too broad and too shallow for me to find really particularly interesting. The difference here, the two things that really attracted me to this book to begin with were, first of all, the fact that this was written by Edward Ezell. I've read a number of his other books. He wrote a couple very good books on the M16. He wrote an outstanding, in fact, this was, I believe, his PhD thesis that was revised into a book called The Great Rifle Controversy about the adoption of the M16. That was just a really fascinating piece of reading. So if he wrote this, it's certainly something that I'm gonna give a second look to. And then secondly, to be honest, that's the fact that it has a picture of the Bittner, which is one of the very early German manually operated repeating pistols, 1890s vintage. And I'm kind of a sucker for that sort of thing. I'll basically buy any book that has reference to the Bittners. So having gone that far, I went ahead and got a copy of the book and started reading through it, and I was actually really impressed. This is not so much a coffee table book as it is really a well-done encyclopedia of handguns. Ezell does a lot of discussion about development of pistols. He looks at, instead of where the typical coffee table book would show you a big glossy picture of a 1911 and then maybe a picture of a couple of the other 1911 related pistols and identify them by model. You know, here's a 1902, here's a 1905, and here's the 1911. What Ezell does is actually describe the development process that went from the Colt 1900 to the 1902, the 5, the 8, and all the way through to the final version, the 1911. And why various changes, well, obviously what changes were made, why those changes were made. In this particular example, he includes a lot of discussion on how U.S. officers or U.S. soldiers in the Philippines viewed these early Colt pistols, because they did get them for trials, what they liked, what they didn't like, and how that led to an evolution of the design. So really you get all the best parts of both a textbook describing what's happened and kind of a coffee table book that has a lot of pictures and diagrams. This thing is huge. It's 704 pages. It is all black and white, but it does have an awful lot of pictures, including diagrams. There are some patent drawings. There's some exploded views. It's an outstanding reference for anyone who's interested in the history of pistols, both revolvers and automatics. So why don't we take a look inside? There's a bunch to go through in here, so this will take a couple minutes, and we'll be back in a moment. All right, so you can kind of get an idea of the cool stuff that's inside just by looking at the various guns that are pictured on the cover here. Got some very early interesting guns. So, getting started, he starts with a basic history of firearms and then delving into revolvers. There's this particularly interesting table that kind of jumped out at me a bit, that is a list of all the major adopted military revolvers, primarily divided up by type of lock mechanism. That was really interesting. I hadn't seen tabulation like that done anywhere else before. So we have here a developmental story of the Colt revolvers. Obviously a major impact on handguns in general. And then going through other various revolver types, some interesting things like this, ideas that people tried that didn't really work out. Here's the Bittner that I was mentioning earlier, and like I said, I'm really a sucker for this family of pistols that was only around for a short time. All right, now there is an entirely separate chapter on Borchardt and Luger. Those pistols obviously had a major role to play. And then there is another specific chapter on FN and Browning. Obviously another guy who had a major impact on development of automatic pistols. So, a couple prototypes of the high power. Let's see what else we have in here. Other various self-loaders. This is a section on the U.S. pistol trials from 1907. This particular guy was kind of like the Spanish Joe Loar. This was designed to be cocked one-handed, so this two-finger lever down here acts to cock the gun for you. That was a major concern of cavalry troops at the time, that they wanted to be able to reload and then cock the pistol with one hand while they held the reins with the other. Here's the Bergman, another pistol I'm pretty fond of. And there is the whole developmental history of Bergmans from the very early 1894s all the way through to ultimately the most successful of them, the 1910. Then it goes into looking at handguns by country. So we have France, we have Italy, and here's another good example, development of Berettas, because that open slide Beretta that we're all familiar with really dates back almost 100 years or more. We have British handguns, so Webley Fosbury's in there, the Mars is in there, the various Webley self-loaders are in there. The Soviet Union, Spain prior to 1938. Now, it is worth noting this book in general only covers up to World War II, so it does not cover any modern pistols. But of course the old ones are the really interesting ones anyway. Czechoslovakia, Finland, Japan. There is a brief mention of the Hino Kimura. Very cool little blow forward automatic. There's a section here on just various vintage pictures of handguns in combat. And then I thought it was interesting, there's even a chapter towards the end here, or at the end here, on handgun manufacture and techniques. So that's something that a lot of you guys are interested in. For example, frames for the Browning 1900, various stages of completion. And lastly, there is a chapter on military handgun cartridges. So that covers a lot of the kind of the weird ones that you might not normally be familiar with. Certainly an excellent introduction to someone who wants to know more about military handguns. So there you go, Handguns of the World by Edward Clinton Ezell. This is, I believe, not currently in print, but it's not hard to get a copy of. There's a bunch of copies actually on Amazon right now that start really quite cheap. So the first half dozen or dozen people who follow up and decide to get a copy will get a really good deal. After that, I don't know exactly what kind of price the market will stabilize at, but this is, if you're only going to have one book on handguns, I would be hard-pressed to come up with a better one than this for overall coverage of handguns. So hope you guys will pick up a copy and enjoy it as much as I have. Thanks for watching, and tune back into ForgottenWeapons.com for more interesting book reviews.